Hello, and welcome to Your Place, a video magazine with informative chats with newsmakers in automotive retailing. I'm Dennis McGinn, founder and chief executive officer for vehicle reconditioning and communications company, Recon. 3 times a month on Your Place, we visit with guests at their place of business and conversations about issues shaping the car business. Our guest today is Dan Kommeth, Variable Operations Director for Kenwood Automotive Group out of Cincinnati. Now let's get to it. So maybe Dan, you could just talk a little bit about yourself and your background, and then I'd like to get into a little bit about your mission for Kenwood and kind of how you're approaching that.
Sure. Thanks, Dennis. Like you said, Dan Kommeth. I'm Director of Sales for Kenwood Dealer Group. My 28th year in the car business, and full disclosure, I was not a process guy when I got into the business, but really became one just through trial and error and seeing what worked and didn't work. And when I realized that process really was the underlying thing to success, then I became a believer. So you came in, I know, about a little less than 2 years ago. I don't remember the exact time, but I remember you calling me and saying, "Hey, I've got a new challenge here. I'm going to be in Cincinnati, and there's a great group, great people, big challenge." So I think you came in and started to figure out, okay, where am I starting from? And I think your big Toyota store was the first place. And I remember you saying, "Hey, they have meetings every Monday. They talk about their reconditioning process and how they're doing, but they don't know really where they are. I mean, they think they're at a couple of, but they're not." And so I think the starting point you told me about was, well, I'm going to be there every Monday for those meetings, and we're going to figure out where they're really starting. So maybe you could pick up from that. And I know you've been up and down with that particular store, but it sounds like a really great case study. Yes, it was, and I'll use the analogy of trying to lose weight. If the store didn't have a way to measure whether they were successful or not, and so if you don't own a scale, you never know how much you weigh. So they were going through the motions of having a meeting, but when I asked how long it was taking to get a car ready for the front line, they'd say, "Well, we think it's about 28 days." And I said, "Well, where'd you come up with that number?" And they're like, "Well, it just seems like that." I was like, "Well, okay, that's great. If you don't have a yardstick with to measure that by, you really don't know, right?" And so that, and being the process guy, I was brought into the group, for hopefully a multitude of reasons, but one of them is to really take process measurement and put it into the stores from a daily operation standpoint to help us hit our goals, right? Because it doesn't matter what the goal is. It doesn't matter if it's reconditioning or anything else. Hey, I want to sell 300 cars a month. Okay, great. How are we going to get there? As opposed to just showing up to work and say, "Let's figure it out." How about we get a process together and we try to work that process and measure it to see if we can accomplish that goal. So really getting that culture change, where before there was very little process management, to where we are now. I mean, it's something where I don't think that it's ever done really, but it was quite a big culture shift, I'll say. So how when you went there and sat down with this group, how did you explain that? It sounds like you said, "Hey, I'm here. I'm going to help you figure out what yardstick to use. We're going to get started, and I'm going to be here till we have some numbers to work with." And the GM's obviously a key person in every one of these stores. I mean, they've got to support it and buy in and that kind of thing. In that particular case, how was your relationship with the GM, and how did that progress? Yeah, it was, it was good because, I was the unknown quantity, right? And it was not about what I thought success was. It was about what does the GM feel success is? Where do you feel like, so we'll use reconditioning, for example. Where do you feel success lies for your dealership? And this is a large Toyota store, and they recondition 300 vehicles a month. It's a big operation. And he said, well, if we can get to 10 days, then I would consider that a success. Okay, well, that's not me telling him that 10 days is success. He came up with the goal, and he's the vision guy, right? In this store, as the GM should be. And so, okay, great. That's now let's figure out what processes we're going to put in place to get to 10 days, right? Who are the people? What's the, do we need, what do we need? What are all the elements that we need? So at least we had a starting point. So for me, the important thing was to come across as not to a threat or, as to what they were doing, but an addition to the team, where it's like, I can be another set of eyes and ears, lend my experience or lend a perspective, or just, sometimes when you're looking at something and you stare at it for so long, you lose perspective, and somebody comes along and is like, hey, did you look at that? You go, oh yeah, I didn't see that. So really that's the type of the role I can provide, through the experience, but really the underlying thing of all of it, no matter what the goal is the processes. They pick the goals, then I help them work out the process and all the details and all the underlying things that are there.
That particular store, I think, once you got the team on it, started to come down in the number of days. So they started to see the results of the attention to process. Mm-hmm. And then, if I remember correctly, there was a point at which they kind of fell off the bus. In other words, they said, hey, okay, something's wrong here. Things aren't right. But the fact that they had a process and they knew where they should be helped them to get back there. Maybe, am I remembering that correctly?
Yeah, and that's I think a good point to make, Dennis. Just because you put a process in does not mean that it is going to work. As a matter of fact, they fail more often than they work, and you get the greater long-term success, in my opinion, when things go wrong. And now when I say wrong, I don't mean off the rails wrong, but you have an opportunity to see where the weak points are so that you can fix them. And so, yes, in my experience, when you have no process and then you install a process, you have immediate improvement, right? Back to the weight loss analogy. If you have no weight management strategy and all of a sudden you start paying attention to your diet, you pretty quickly lose weight, right? But then there's that plateau effect. And in this particular case where things got in line and they started getting better, and really we saw all the metrics where we're like, boy, this is going great, this is going great. Well, then what happened? I mean, the process is just one part of it, but the most important part of the process is the people that are executing the process. Well, they lost a couple of people. And when you're reconditioning 300 cars, it doesn't seem like a lot, but you lose 2 people out of the whole team of people that's processing that. You lose throughput. And that really affected that number that's at the end there. And that stumbling, that caused us to have to rethink things. Like, okay, what can we do differently? What do we have to change? How do we have to adapt? And it's only through those stumbles and those redirections or rethinking of things that you really get the long-term success, because the adaptability of the people based on the circumstances, I think that helps define long-term success. So yeah, it gets back on track, but that's not to say that, hey, a couple months down the line, I mean, certainly no one saw COVID coming a couple of years ago. You have to adapt your process to that. Or local, there were states where you couldn't have the showrooms open and you had to sell cars a different way. Well, that's going to lead to a change in processes. When you have the people that are adaptable and are willing to change the process, I think that you're going to be more successful than the people who are like, well, we can't do business like we've always done it, so what do we do now? Let's just give up. I mean, that's it. No one. Well, at least I don't want to do that. That's for sure.
You and I have talked a lot about this, but the essence of process and its value to improvement is always looking for ways to improve. And in reconditioning, there are a couple ways to do it. You can either have somebody come in and tell them what the process should look like. Why don't you do it the same way this other store does? Or you get the mentality into that team that they own the process improvement, and so then they start contributing individually to that, because they're looking at those metrics that you're putting up there, which is where that's our yardstick. We now know we're at X days, and we would like to get to Y days, and I'm wondering. Obviously, that absorbs with different people in different ways. And so, do you have maybe cite some examples of how that's worked with people, them basically saying, okay, now that's good. Now I got it. And the team gets it, and it's going to be ups and downs, but we got it. So we're going to continually keep looking for ways to improve things. So,
yeah, I'd be happy to. The one that's the most glaring example was from the photography. As we know, with a used car, when you acquire that used car, people are wanting to see pictures of it online. When you have a listing, if you have a listing without pictures, you can look at your VDPs. They fall through the floor compared to cars that have photos. Well, anyhow, at the Toyota store, the lot techs were also the same people that took photos of the car. Well, that part of the process was at the end of reconditioning, but we were having a problem with it taking so long to get cars through the reconditioning process that the cars weren't getting the looks online that we wanted them to get. And so the lot attendants who were, hey, that's several steps removed from the general manager, right? That job. They came up with the idea, and they said, hey, what if we took some photographs early on in the process, maybe from a little further away? Like at the end, we do a lot of up close, and you're getting in there on the tire treads and all that kind of stuff. Well, what if we took some photos of the car before it goes into the, as long as there's not, damage to the car or something like that, but shots from further away, there are kind of these pre-photos. And then when it comes out on the other side, when it gets back down to us, so we'll take the close-up photos and we'll discard those first photos. So they came up with a new bucket. There was initial photos, and they took responsibility for that bucket, but they also took responsibility at the end of the process when they got to the actual last final pictures. So the end result of that is that we saw the VDPs go back up, and then we had so then you get people interested in seeing that car as it's going through the process.
Maybe one last question before I let you go. How has your management team at Kenwood, the folks that brought you in to help improve this thing, how do they feel about how things are going, and what kind of support do you get from them, and do they communicate out to in your management meetings? I know they get everybody together from time to time, and kind of what's their take on all this?
Yeah, the good part is that everybody, and I'm speaking our industry in a whole right now, is successful, right? The marketplace, that's just the market right now. We're fortunate that everybody is profitable, and phenomenally so. The stores that are more process oriented, and because we're on a, not everybody is process oriented as we would want, but the stores that are more oriented toward that are even more profitable. So getting back to the buy-in part of it from a cross store emphasis. It's part of my job to make sure the other stores know. And they trust me, we're competitive in this business. We know even when we're part of the same team as the same group, the GMs, they want to win. So when I can take examples of it's store A, we're doing this and we're getting this result, or they'll bring it up to me and they'll say, hey, what are they doing over there? I want to know what's going on. Oh, okay. Well, let me tell you. And then I go into the process that we're working on there. Their ears perk up and they take notice. And then once again, from a buy-in perspective, it's got to start from the top, right? Where it's like the general manager of a store, in my opinion, they have to be the one where it's like, if it's important to them and they are bought in on whatever that is, then it can cascade down from there. And then, because if it's important to them, it's going to be important to everybody else. If the general manager says, I want the cleanest lot, I don't want any garbage on my lot, I don't want one piece of paper or one stick of gum or one weed or something like that, and it starts with him or her, it goes down from there, and you'll have the cleanest lot that's out there. So back to process, when they're bought into the process management, and it cascades down from there, they find and they retain employees who buy into that culture, because that's really what it is. It's a culture. And when they find those people, boy, it sure makes it a heck of a lot easier. It's not to say they can't be done, but when you're surrounded by a team of people that's all bought into that, it makes it a lot easier.
I love hearing this. It kind of relates so well back to my background and the technology world and things. And I'm continually trying to find new ways to help folks like you to work with the stores, with your stores, with the groups and things like that. So this really helps. I really appreciate your insights. And having watched you through a number of roles in this thing, I think your approach keeps evolving too, in terms of because you've seen the results of your efforts in several different groups. Yeah. All right. Well, thank you. Thank you. Appreciate your time, and we will see you on the next round.
Thanks, Dennis.